Thank you very much, everyone, to join and spend the Saturday afternoon with me and everyone. So we always try to look at the different things, and then so today we are going to discuss on the first part of the chapter 4 of Zhuang Zi's writing. Okay, so we have been through Zhuang Zi's 7th chapter, the inner chapter. We have done 3 chapters, and then last week we talked about another ancient Chinese dialectician, Gong Sun Long, which is not related to today's subject. And then today we talk about chapter 4, but next week we are going to talk about not me, SK, Shash is going to talk about Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7. The reason I bring the Bhagavad Gita here is for those who familiar with Bhagavad Gita, please put Bhagavad Gita in mind for today's section. In my opinion, it's very related. Okay, so if we have a chance, I would like to discuss about Bhagavad Gita and then the situation. Think about Bhagavad Gita's situation during the battlefield, the Krishna and Arjuna's conversation. So I think it's related to today's Zhuang Zi, okay, in the different side of the world. One in India, one is in China. And July 7, we are going to continue to finish the chapter 4 of Zhuang Zi. Then we go to chapter 5, 6, and then to chapter 7, and then we can finish probably before the summer. So that's the plan for the schedule. So the book I'm following is this book translated by Fung You Lan. We read his philosophy of a short history of Chinese philosophy for over 1.5 years. And right now we are reading his translation on Zhuang Zi. And then today's chapter, we call the translation, we call it the human world. And this section is a little bit long, so I decide to split to 2 parts. So, and actually it can naturally split in 2 parts because chapter 4, the name is the nature of the human world. And on the first part, Zhuang Zi is talking about how to serve your Lord. Okay, that means in today's interpretation would be how to do your business. If you work for a company, work for the government, so what's the best way to serve your boss to this way? And the next section, we go to how to survive or how to live in this world. So chapter 4 is very much talking about this world. Okay, so if you recall in chapter 3, Zhuang Zi is talking about taking care of yourself. So the person, you, individual, is being treated as an individual, a single person, how you take care of yourself. Okay, and this chapter, Zhuang Zi is going to teach us how to live in this world. So that's the purpose of chapter 4. And we're going to go through the first part of chapter 4. So just a brief introduction about Zhuang Zi. Zhuang Zi lived in the 369 to 286 BCE. So that's roughly Aristotle's time in Greek. And then his name is Zhuang Zhou. And the only book we have is the book we call Zhuang Zi. Okay, Zhuang Zi means the person, also means his philosophy, also means his book. So his book have total 33 chapters. And the chapter 1 to 7 being considered as most important as written by Zhuang Zi himself. And the outer chapter is from 8 to 22nd, which being considered being written by Zhuang Zi's disciple. And the chapter 23 to 33 being considered written by the people after about 100 or 200 years later. So all these 33 chapters combined, we call the book Zhuang Zi. And in this year, we try to do is introduce the first 7 chapters, which being considered as the core of Zhuang Zi's philosophy. And then we consider, and if you go through that, we will go through many times, you will know, and I hope you will agree, it's a complete, a comprehensive philosophical system, okay, from metaphysics, politics, religious, metaphysics, moral, politics, and it's a complete system. So I think that's important. Let me take care of this one. Need to remove this. Okay, here I see a hacker coming, so I just remove it. So the book we use, okay, is Zhuang Zi. Okay, Zhuang Zi is created a long time ago. So there's many ways to interpret Zhuang Zi. There's many ways to read Zhuang Zi. At least I know in the university, the National Taiwan University, which I graduated, at least they teach Zhuang Zi, this book, in different departments. So sometimes they have the same teaching in philosophy department. So they teach in a philosophical way, and also in the literature department, they also teach Zhuang Zi, but teach Zhuang Zi as a literature writing. So there's many ways to interpret this book. And also, a lot of people in the temple, this one also considered as a religious book. So there's many ways to read it. And the way we are reading today, of course, we don't ignore the other aspect of this book, but we will focus on its philosophical interpretation, so which has been interpreted by Xiang Xiu and Guo Xiang, these 2 persons who is on the 2nd and the 3rd AD, okay? So it's 500 years after Zhuang Zi, and the translation is by Fung You Lan. And if you see the color, if I put the red color, that means Guo Xiang's interpretation. If I put the blue, that means Fung You Lan's interpretation, the translator's interpretation. So that's the way we are going to read this book. But it doesn't mean we ignore the other aspect, like religious reading or literature reading. So that's the point. So just a brief summarize on this 7 inner chapter, right? So we have been through the 3 chapters already. So each one kind of poses different kind of question. Okay, Zhuang Zi has an answer. So the first one, so-called the happy excursion, or sometimes people call happy wandering. Okay, basis is talking about what we can achieve. Okay, talking about big bird. So it talking about the goal of Zhuang Zi's philosophy. And the chapter 2, I think, is the most difficult one, which is talking about metaphysics. And then after that, Zhuang Zi put 4 dialogue, Platonic dialogue. And then finally end with a dream. That's a very famous dream, the butterfly dream. Zhuang Zi dreamed himself as a butterfly. When he wake up, he's not sure he is a butterfly dream as Zhuang Zi, a person, or a person dream of a butterfly. So this one, a lot of the theory is in this chapter, chapter 2, basically talk about what's true, what's false, what's real, what's illusion, and importantly about language. And the language part is going to show up in today's meet up, because when you live in this world, our communication is using language. Then we will see how Zhuang Zi see the usage and how to use language when we live in this world. Chapter 3, that the famous story is a so-called cook Ding, a famous chef who cut off the ox, cow, okay? So he's very skillful, but basics is not talking about skillfulness, it's talking about how to live as an individual, so-called the cultivation of life, how to live your life as an individual. So today in chapter 4, Zhuang Zi is going to turn the point to answer the question, how to live in this world, this society. So this one, including the reading should be easy because they have 7 different stories. And then today we are going to go over the first 3 stories, which is related to politics. And then next time, I think in July 8th, and we are going to, 2 weeks from now, we are going to finish the second part of this chapter. And then we will go on chapter 5. Zhuang Zi will talk about virtue, okay, and he is going to talk about his view of virtue, because all the philosophy have talked about virtue. And the chapter 6 is about so-called the great master is Zhuang Zi's religious view, or we can call it mysticism. So for the people who focus, or the person want to read Zhuang Zi as a religious book, so chapter 6 is the important part. And the chapter 7, the Fung You Lan translate as the philosopher king, which is very platonic, but of course, Zhuang Zi's view of philosopher king is very different from Plato's philosopher king. So it's a Taoism sage king based on Wu. That's Zhuang Zi's whole book we're going to cover. So basics, that's the quick review, and I don't think we have to go through many of this one. Each chapter we have go through, and chapter 2 we talk about butterfly dream, and the last time we talk about the fundamental of cultivation of life, and which start with limitation. I think this one is related to today's subject. It's a continuity, right? In chapter 3, Zhuang Zi is talking about, at beginning, Zhuang Zi talking about the limit. Our life is limited, but the knowledge is infinitude. Okay, so we have infinity amount of knowledge we can pursue, but our life is limited. So how are we going to deal with this? So he talked about a few different stories, and turned out to talk about life and the death. And the one thing I'd like to point out is Zhuang Zi's view is considered very, his word is a so-called deterministic word, or you want to call it the spontaneous word. Basically, he means as a human, we are not able to change this world. So how are we going to live in this world? That's Zhuang Zi's concept. That's Zhuang Zi face the problem as a small human, and how to live in this world. And then in Western philosophy, I think it's very similar to Spinoza's talking about the human bondage. You have been limited in this world, but with your own free will, how are you going to live in this world? I think that's the topic Zhuang Zi want to talk about. And we will have time later to talk about compare Zhuang Zi and Spinoza's concept. And I think the translator Fung You Lan also put this one in the effort, this one. So chapter 4, that's what we are going to talk about for today. Today we are going to the first part. I organized this chapter in ABC 3 parts. So today we are going to cover A, okay, and next time we're going to cover B and C. C is very short. As usual, Zhuang Zi's story usually starts on a very long story. They get shorter and shorter. So today we face three problems. Okay, that's Zhuang Zi, today's subject. I put the A1, A2, A3. Okay, basic first is talking about Yan Hui, who is the Confucius, the best student. He has a mission to go to state of Wei, to talk to a tyrant in state of Wei. So what's the best way to do in his situation? Second story is talking about how to be an ambassador, or in today's way, probably we should know how to use our language as a messenger. Number three, okay, it's talking about how to tutoring a young tyrant. Okay, so you will see these three are all difficult situation, and then you face some moral dilemma. And this way, Zhuang Zi is going to teach you what's the best way to do it. And then that's for today's meetup. Before we go to the text, for those who already read this Zhuang Zi, or who read Zhuang Zi in your own, you will see Zhuang Zi in Zhuang Zi's book, you will see Confucius many times, and especially in today's book 7 story, and the three story is related Confucius. Okay, because you talk about the secular world, you talk about politics, you have no way to ignore Confucius. But we need to be careful. When in Zhuang Zi's story, the Confucius role is very strange. When Confucius is teaching, okay, he spoke for Zhuang Zi. He is not Confucius. He is the great Taoist teacher. So his voice you can consider as Zhuang Zi's voice. Okay, that's number one. So in today's story, first 2 story, you will see Confucius speaking, but don't take Confucius as the Confucius in analects. Okay, you can swap him with the name Zhuang Zi or Lao Zi, okay, as a Taoist teacher. Okay, but sometimes in other story, okay, you will see Confucius was mentioned. He's not in teaching, or somebody taught Confucius. For example, there's one story talk about old fisherman, and at that time, an old fisherman is teaching he was teaching Confucius. Okay, during this kind of story, Confucius is the real Confucius, the Confucian Confucius. Okay, so just keep in mind, Confucius in Zhuang Zi had a different role. Okay, so we need to separate this role, otherwise you will get the wrong message. Most important, in all Zhuang Zi's story about Confucius are not true. There's no historical account about this. So today we will read the 2 Confucius story, and then they are, just 1 minute. They are not true. Okay, none of them are true. So never consider it's a true story. Okay, so historically, legendary, because Zhuang Zi invented this story. So before I start the first story, is any question or any comment? Okay, please. I will stop here for 1 minute if you have a question or something you want to comment. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. A minute ago, you said the phrase, quote, human bondage.
Yeah.
You mentioned the name of another author who wrote about, quote, human bondage, but I was not able to hear accurately what the name of that author was. Can you say it more slowly?
Spinoza.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
That's a big subject in this author, the Fung You Lan, the translator. Okay, because the translator. Okay, the author of the not Zhuang Zi. Okay, the English translator. He himself is a philosopher. He grew up. He was born in, I think, in 19th century, and he was Chinese trained and came to America, in Columbia, study as a student of Zhuang Tzu. Okay, so he got both sides philosophical training. So he compared the worldview of Zhuang Zi is similar to what Spinoza thinking about this world. So that's why human bondage is important. So we are not going to discuss this one, but if you are familiar with Spinoza, please put human bondage in your mind and think about, what's the difference or what's the similarity. And another thing I'd like to mention is if you are familiar with Bhagavad Gita, the Hindus reading, and also please put the situation in your mind, because I think they are facing the same situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And any other comment, question? Or anybody read the translation, and is anything you want to comment, or you face any question or any part you want me to have a further explanation, because it's quite long, so I have to decide by myself which part is important. But if you read it and you have some question or you want some part to be more clear, please let me know. CK, please.
Just make a very casual comment on A3, tutoring a young tyrant.
Okay, yes.
I don't know whether that word tyrant has negative connotations, but in the original Greek form of political organization, tyranny or tyrant has no negative connotations. It is just merely a factual statement. So don't know whether this tyrant is meant in a negative way, or is it just a factual description?
It's not factual description. It's very, very negative way. Okay, so Chinese words used in bao. Okay, bao jun. Okay. So that means I don't think Chinese. That's no way to be neutral. That's very negative. Okay, description.
Okay, I think maybe an oppressive ruler would be better description.
Yeah, you can say oppressive ruler. I think in Zhuang Zi's text, he talking about he is just like Jie and Zhou, this kind of person. Okay. So,
Yeah,
totally.
because I think the word tyrant has been misused for ages.
I agree. Yeah. For example, the story A1 and story A3 all deal with tyrant. But they are talking about different kind of evil, right? The first one talking about the person, the tyrant, the ruler, kill a lot of people, doing about the bad thing. Number 3, A3 talk about he is not a ruler yet. He just, actually I should not call tyrant. Actually, he is the oldest son of a king, and he is very bad person, okay, and irrational. And this kind of person. So I think that's the correct word. Any other comment? Thank you for any kind of clarification, because we are dealing with ancient Chinese texts, and which the author Zhuang Zi is not writing for you guys. It's not writing for the Western audience, and he's not writing for philosophical purpose. He just writes something of his thought. So the translation could be very misleading, okay, but not on my purpose to mislead people, because I only see certain aspect of the word in Chinese and in English. So I have to pick one word to make the translation. And if you feel it's improper or you feel, misleading, and please let me know. And any kind of question will help. Okay, so if
I do have a question. I know.
Please.
It was about your idea, Jason, that as humans we are not able to change the world.
Not my idea, Zhuang Zi's idea.
Yes, your formulation of that idea.
Okay, yes.
If the world sort of evolves according to its nature, and human beings maybe are a part of that, aren't there human beings who do change the world? Or is it just that they're pushing in a different direction? Like you're not trying to stop a process, but just deflect it a little bit.
I think in Zhuang Zi's point of view is just deflected. You are not going to change it. If it's a tyrant, it's a tyrant, and then you can change it, but it's only in a certain way. Okay, so that's today's subject, and that's why I also mentioned Bhagavad Gita, right? In just story, I think some people join the meetup know Bhagavad Gita. In the battlefield, Arjuna is about to, his duty is to fight the war. And then, of course, when you fight in the war, you are going to win. You are going to defeat your enemy. But your enemy is your grandfather, your teacher, your cousin. Why should I fight? Even I win, I'm not happy. I lose, of course, I lose my life. And then what should I do? Right? That's the situation. We are constantly face this moral dilemma. Okay. And we have not much to do on that. I'm not saying that's my view, but that's Zhuang Zi's point of view. And that's Bhagavad Gita point of view of the world, and the same as Spinoza's point of view. He think about this world is one big essence, the being which is God, and we live here. How can we be happy? I think that's the same situation. So. Okay, so if no more discussion, then we are going to the following. I think we can pace like half hour or 20 minutes for each story. So we will have a good pace to discuss all this story. Joe, please.
Yeah, just actually, can you explain just a little bit about what they mean by human nature in this section? Just
do I talk about human nature in this?
I had one sentence that was talking about the best way to deal with man is to act.
Oh, you talk about in the reading. Talk about the best way. Fung You Lan said. Okay, I got your point. I remember I read this one. I'm not 100% agree with Fung You Lan. Okay, I just have to, and then I think he mentioned that one. He talked about example is the tiger keeper, the zookeeper, right? So to deal with tiger, because it's a dangerous, just like a little bit spoil on the story, tutoring the tyrant, just like you as a zookeeper. Okay, as tiger keeper. Okay, so same situation. You have to be close with tiger. So how are you going to live with tiger? Okay, so only way you do it is based on tiger's nature, right? Tiger will eat meat. You will not train tiger to eat vegetable. Okay, so got to eat meat. So what the keeper do? He has to make sure tiger Actually, I verified, a few months ago, I visited San Diego Safari Zoo, and I asked the zookeeper, do you feed live animal to tiger? He said, no, we don't do that. It's a same answer as Zhuang Zi's answer. It will stimulate, okay, the tiger's nature. Okay, so it become violent. So they always give not the cooked meat, they chop the meat and feed the tiger. Same as Zhuang Zi's story. They don't give the whole animal, they just give piece of meat. So, that's the way to deal with the human nature. So I think that's what Fung You Lan means in human nature. But I don't see Zhuang Zi, the text, talk about human nature on this chapter. That's my point.
No, thank you. I mean, that's kind of where I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. On it.
Yeah, thank you.
Not imposing your will on others as well. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, we can discuss, because the human nature is a very interesting subject, and not only in Chinese philosophy, also in the Western philosophy. And to the point, is human like a machine or not? If you insist human has a certain kind of nature, does that mean human just like a machine? So that's a big subject. Okay, so let's start with the very first story. Okay, so I put the title on that. Basics, the story just exactly like the translation. Okay, so this chapter is different. There's no other thing, just start from Yan Hui. Okay, if you are familiar with Confucius Analect, you will know Yan Hui is the Confucius' best student. He died at the year, I think 30 something, he died early, and the Confucius consider him is the most virtuous and the smartest student. Unfortunately, he died early. So Zhuang Zi here, of course, one more time, the story is no way to be true. Zhuang Zi just make it up. Okay, so Yan Hui here you can see as a typical, Zhuang Zi lived about 150 years after the death of Confucius. So 100 years, okay, so basically there's a few generation gap. So Zhuang Zi and Yan Hui must be the famous name. He probably know this name, okay, and know their story. So he borrow this name to create his own story. So he started with Yan Hui, went to see Confucius and asked leave to take his departure. So the master, Confucius, said, where are you going? Yan Hui said, I'm going to the state of Wei. Okay, so with what object? What's your purpose to go there? So that's Yan Hui's answer. I'm going to read. I hear the prince, the ruler of Wei, is in the vigors of his youth, a young, I call it tyrant, okay, and is determined in his action. He will not listen to other advice. He behaved as if the state were not important and will not see his own fault. He thinks lightly of his people's death, and consequently the dead are lying all over the country like so much undergrowth in the marsh. A lot of people die because of this tyrant. The people know not where to turn. Okay, once you master, he said, sir, my teacher, you taught me this. I highlight, leave the state is well governed. Go to the state where disorder prevails. Okay, I don't think Confucius ever teach this one, but okay, you can assume Confucius the Confucian scholar will do this way. When the state is well ordered, you have nothing to do, and then when the state is disordered, you need to go there to fix the state. I don't think Confucius talk about this, but Yan Hui just say this. At the door of a physician, so Yan Hui used the example, right? In the hospital, we have a lot of sick people, but so we Confucian scholar, we need to do is fix the state. That's why I need to go to state of Wei, which is ruled by a young tyrant, right? Young tyrant is important because if an old tyrant is going to die soon, then we have new hope. But if the tyrant is young, then that's the problem. So that's answer SK's question. Basically, it's not a neutral description; it's a negative description. So Confucius, okay, so right now the Confucius is talking as Taoist scholar, okay, he's not Confucius anymore. Alas, okay, I'm afraid you will only succeed in giving suffering and punishment to yourself. Basically, he talked about you are going to die if you go there, right? And here he talked about some method. I'll just make it more organized this way. Confucius, okay, or Taoist teaching is Tao is one, right? And one means not mixture. So he said, Yanhui, you are mixture, okay? And the mixture means many means confusion. Confusion will cause embarrassment, and the embarrassment will cause the dangerous situation. So he said, you have no way to be successful, and you yourself will be in danger. That's Confucius' point. Then Confucius continue. I think this teaching is important, and you may see it's controversial. It's total anti-Confucian school. Okay, so that you will see that's different because knowledge and the virtue, that's the two important key in look around any philosophy. These two things are most important. But you will hear from here, from Confucius speaking, which is Taoism speaking. Confucius said, the perfect man of ancient, which means the good situation, was required to take care of himself before taking care of others. So first, you need to take care of yourself, then take care of others. Okay. If in taking care of oneself, there is still something unestablished, what leisure has one to attend to the conduct of weak men, right? So you have to take care of yourself, then you can attend to the conduct of the weak man, which is tyrant. Besides, do you know where virtue is spoiled, where knowledge is begin? I think that's important here. Confucius, his answer is this. Virtue is spoiled with desire for fame. Knowledge begin with there is contention. Okay, so in Chinese word he called it 得当乎名，知出乎真. I think that's important. That's why I highlight. So basics Confucius, okay, which is Taoism, Taoist Confucius talking about. When we talk about virtue, a lot of time, okay, or we can say most of the time, you look at the virtuous people, what they desire is the fame. You want to get the fame of virtuous people. When we talk about knowledge, a lot of time, or most of the time, we are talking about contention. We try to compete, I have more knowledge. So if you recall on chapter 3, when Zhuang Zi talked about cultivation of life, the opening is talking about your life is limited, but the knowledge is infinite. Okay, so so the knowledge and the virtue is dangerous on this one. So here he continues, say both. He means virtue and the knowledge are instrument of evil and shall have no place in one's conduct. So which is contradictory to what we understand. We want to have virtue, we want to have knowledge. But in Zhuang Zi's point of view, the virtue, actually you are looking what you want to what you desire in virtue is fame. Okay, so use virtue as a means and use knowledge also as a means to compete with others. So they both falsely impose the teaching of benevolence, righteousness, and the rule on wit. Consequently, they are hated for the very reason they are good. Okay, this is called hurt others. So he's talking about Yan Hui. Okay, you can think about this situation. You don't have to agree, but you can think about this situation. Yan Hui as a virtuous people and with a lot of knowledge, he being viewed as a virtuous people and with a lot of people, and he go to the state of Wei and talk to a tyrant. Okay, so what message the tyrant, the king of Wei received? He see a virtuous people, a knowledgeable people come to me as a tyrant and tell me what to do. So in another way, you just want to get a virtuous name. You just want to show you have a good knowledge. So in this situation, you are hurting me, hurting the tyrant, and what the tyrant will do is hurt you back. So, so you will get hurt, and in this way, if you go to the state of Wei, that's Confucius' warning. And the Confucius, of course, he knows Yan Hui is not dumb, and he continued. All right, if you worry about your situation, what you will do is when you see the tyrant get angry, you will become too quiet, and gradually you, in order to protect your own life, you will be quiet, and then you will be seen as you agree with the tyrant. Okay, so Confucius' story is you go there, you teach virtue, teach knowledge to a weak man. And the weak man is not the regular weak man, it's a powerful weak man. So this guy is feel you are hurting him with virtue and knowledge. So he's going to hurt you back. And if you either be killed, or if you say, oh, no, I don't say that, and be quiet. So you are being viewed as you are a virtuous people, agree with the tyrant. And in this case, just like you quail fire with fire, water with water. So you don't make the situation better. You make the situation worse, because the tyrant will see a virtuous man is agree with me. So actually, you are not helping at all. Okay. So Confucius continued talking about the situation. He said formally, Confucius, is give the example of ancient tyrant. He talk about Jie and Zhou. Okay, that's the famous tyrant. We don't have to be and kill Guan Fenglong and Bi Gan. Okay, so that's his royal minister, or we call the virtuous officer. Okay, so that's the same story. Confucius just bring up the story, like see, in the ancient time, there's a tyrant, right? And his minister give him advice. Oh, you don't do that. So turn out, what's the situation? They all got killed. Okay, and there is not help. The tyrant will not change anything. So the reason is because their way of moral virtue, their ruler crushed them, all struggle for them. In Confucius, here, Taoism Confucius point of view, you see, a tyrant, right, kill a virtuous advisor. Why? Because they all compete for the fame. Because the virtuous minister want to get the fame of virtuous people. Okay, so this kind of virtue hurt the tyrant, and tyrant doesn't want to get the name of bad people, so he just kill him. So to you, in Taoist point of view, you guys are the same, right? The tyrant and the virtuous people, you give advice. You guys are just fighting for the fame, for the name. Then Confucius give a second example. He, instead of talking about tyrant, he talked about ancient sage king, right? He used Yao and Yu. Okay, that's ancient sage king, the good king. The good king even will conquer the state called Zhuang Zi and Xu Ao, okay, that's the small state. Even the sage king will conquer the small state, okay? For what reason? To gain the name, okay? So gain the reality. So doesn't matter how you do it, okay? The powerful people, they want to get the name. So his conclusion is even the sage failed to overcome the desire for fame and the real gain. Can you be successful? He said, there's no way to be successful, okay, unless you have a better plan, okay? Tell me, Yan Hui, okay, you have any better plan? Okay, so Yan Hui, again, give a very typical Confucian kind of answer, right? The Chinese word is very difficult, so I just disagree on Fung You Lan's translation. That's why I provide my own translation. Chinese read as 端而虚，免而一. Okay, that's very difficult to translate. So I will translate as behaving in uprightness and humility, persisting in one or in unity. So that means that's a typical Confucius way. You behave righteously, not necessarily to talk, and persistent in the same way. That's Confucius teaching, very good Confucius way to do it. Just make sure. Okay. So Confucius answer said, no, that's not the right way to do it. Okay. He said, those will not do, right? He talked about the Prince of Wei is full of masterful spirit and make much show of himself. Here, talking about the tyrant's personality, right? Full about himself. Okay, so he is talking about in the original word, Zhuang Zi used the word yang, yin and yang, the concept. So you will see how Zhuang Zi talk about this situation. So he talk about he will pretend he agree with you if you do this way, right? The tyrant will do is, since you are not advise me, you just behave as a righteous person. And then the tyrant will do is he may outwardly agree with you, but inwardly there will be no self-condemnation. So in this way, Yan Hui, you still not achieve your goal. You go there, he just, oh, okay, you are a good person, and then thank you for coming, and then that's the best situation. He's not going to change. So why are you going there, right? So Yan Hui will continue, say, oh, I have a better way. Since he's Confucius, the best student, I will simplify this long sentence to 3 points, right? 2 points. Okay, so Yan Hui said, inwardly maintaining my uprightness, and I will outwardly seem to be crude. Okay, 内直而外曲. That means, I think this one, Yan Hui, has become very Taoist way. Okay, so he talked about, I will keep my righteousness, my uprightness inward, but outward, I will comply with him. Okay, so, and then when I try to teach him, I will use skill. Okay, I will do as a follower of nature, 与天为图. I think another way is I use the Tao of heaven, and I use the Tao of people. I use the Tao of ancient to teach you. Okay, and they should work. Okay. And the Confucius continue the second suggestion. I say, no, it's not going to work. It's right way to do it. So in this way, Confucius, you see the first time, Confucius say you are in danger. The second point, if you are not in danger, you probably, help the tyrant, okay? And the number 3, if you do another way, you probably no effect at all because the tyrant will pretend, okay, he agree with you, but it's not change anything. This solution, Confucius say, yeah, it's the right solution. You inwardly maintain your rightness, but outward you behave like the tyrant. and find a chance by teaching the tyrant about the Tao of nature or the heaven, the Tao of man and Tao of the ancient. So that means you bring the ancient story to teach him. But Confucius, he's even say no, but he kind of not say wrong, right? He say, it works, but it's not the perfect way, right? It's rigid. They can save you from harm, but that's all, okay? It's not a good way. So Confucius is going to teach him the best way, and that will become our key of this dialogue. Confucius talk about fasting of mind. Okay, so the fasting of mind become there's a different scholar have a different interpretation what Zhuang Zi means fasting of mind here, and we can have a further discussion on this one. And then Confucius said, okay, we'll see that's Zhuang Zi's idea. He talked about fasting. Confucius said, okay, then I shall tell you, if you have prejudice, remember on the previous section, Confucius said, you work, but you still have one problem because you have a prejudice, okay? And in Chinese called 私心, okay? So that means you have, before you go there, you already have some mind, some thinking in yourself. That's Confucius talking, and that's why translate as prejudice. And I'm not sure it's the best way to translate, but I cannot find a better way to translate this word. Okay, basically, it's talking about you still, another way to think about is before you go there, you already have some preset moral standard. Okay, that's Confucius is talking about. So Confucius' answer is fasting. If you still have prejudice, okay, preset moral standard, do you think it would be easy to deal with it, right? And then he said, but the fasting of mind is not that easy. And Yan Hui said, if you know the story, Yan Hui, his family is very poor. He said, oh, fasting is easy. My family is very poor. Usually I don't drink, I don't eat meat for months. So fasting is not problem. So by Confucius said, this is the fasting of sacrificing or sacrificial fasting. Confucius is not talking about fasting of your body. He talking about fasting of mind. So Yan Wei was shocked. Oh, please tell me what's the fasting of mind. So that's that's the word here. A little bit mystical, and that's the word toward the translation. I also list the Chinese version. If you have any question, any comment, disagreement, and welcome to let me know. Okay, so Confucius this. Okay, I'm going to read first. Maintain the unity of your will. Do not listen with ear, but with the mind. Do not listen with mind, but with the spirit. Here, spirit, he used the word is qi. Okay, the function of ear and with hearing. The function of mind and with symbol and idea. But the qi, the spirit, is an emptiness ready to receive all things. Tao abide in the emptiness. The emptiness is the fasting of mind. So I believe different people read this one will have a different idea, but in my personal interpretation is here the word used emptiness, okay, but please don't get, well, it's similar with Buddhism talking about emptiness, but Chinese word is not kong, it's called xu, okay. So these two words are different, but in a way they are the same. So if you want to call it emptiness, it's fine, but I just cannot find a better word to use for in this case. So in my idea, that's just Jason, myself idea. I'm thinking what Zhuang Zi or Confucius talking about here is to Yan Hui as a person who learned a lot from the Confucius virtue, okay, the teaching. But before you go to advise some people, first thing you have to do is empty or forget you have learned before and go to teach. That's the way you become so-called fasting of mind. That's my understanding. So you learn a lot of things, then you should forget it, then go there to deal with the tyrant or a sage kid anyway. You deal with somebody, you should forget what you have learned before. And does that mean you don't have to learn, just ignorant, go there to teach? No, that's different. You have to learn and forget. That's why Confucius or Taoist teacher called fasting of mind, because you already have something learned in your mind. Then you forget it, okay? Let it empty. Stay for a while, do something, then it's empty. Then you go to do something. That's the right way to avoid prejudice. So, and then he started to give some example, right? Confucius said, okay, when I do not try fasting my mind, I think here, okay. So Confucius I think I like this word he used. Confucius talked, let me tell you, enter this man's service, but do not contend for fame. If he find you agreeable, you may make some noise. If not, you keep silent. Two things I'd like to point out here. The translator Fung You Lan calls enter this man's service. Chinese, I like the word yu qi fan. Okay, that's the word translation. Okay, you okay. Fung You Lan translates enter this man's cage, but it doesn't reflect the real meaning. Fan means cage, a big cage. So the first word you, okay, 入游其凡, enter and wandering. Okay, so Zhuang Zi like use this word called wandering. Remember in chapter 1, the happy excursion, actually the same word, you, happy wandering. Okay, and then in chapter 3, the cooking, the skillful cook, he's talk about his knife go through the space of the cow. Okay, and the word he used, the same word, he's not talking about move, he used the word wandering. So in Taoism teaching, this word wandering, or Chinese called yu, is very important. Basically, it means you are moving around without purpose. You can say fool around, but in the positive sense, not the negative sense. So basically talking about you enter or wander in this man's cage, but do not contend for name. Okay. If it's available, you make some noise. If not agreeable, you keep silent. So this keep silent or stop, okay, is important because in Taoism teaching is when you cannot do something, you stop. But Confucius teaching is you only stop at the perfect situation. So I think that's a different part. I see we have some hands up. Oh, we have a lot of hands up. Sorry. Okay. So let me pause here for all the question or comment you have. Let's go through Mark, Bill, and Fred. Mark, please. Is Mark already there?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm here, Jason.
Okay, go
Thank
ahead.
you for that wonderful taking us through of that story and talking about it as you were going through. Just a couple things that struck me. One, that this idea of you're going to be crushed by those in power because you're trying to improve them reminded me of Socrates. I don't know if he would be another example of that. The other thing was when Confucius was saying that there's an opposition between virtue and knowledge. I guess that doesn't sound very Confucian, and I'm wondering if that's what you were pointing to when you were saying that the Confucius that they are representing is more of a Taoist sage.
Yeah, the second question, okay. Remember, I talked about in Zhuang Zi, the Confucius, especially in this story, the Confucius is not Confucius, it's Taoist Confucius. So easy way is we just replace Confucius as Zhuang Zi said something. Yeah, that would be, will not cause will not confuse people. Okay. So does that answer your question, your second question, Mark?
Yes, yes. I thought.
Okay, so I think that's very important. And the Zhuang Zi do this way has his own purpose because he is, in a way, he is making fun of Confucius. Another way, he is talking about Confucius as a great teacher. You are not on the best way. The best way is my way, Taoist way. Okay, so that's what he want to do. And your first point, you mentioned about Socrates. I agree with you. I also think about Socrates' response on that. So I would say these ancient people, they are thinking about the same dilemma, moral dilemma. Socrates faced one, Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, they faced one, Confucius faced the situation, and the Zhuang Zi also faced the same situation. But if you do a close read, you will find out they all have different answers. You may say, oh, their answers are all the same, but in another way, you take a close look, they have some difference, especially because I 2 weeks ago just read Bhagavad Gita, and it's looks the same but different way. Bill, please.
Thank you. I want to make a comment based on a few key phrases in the text.
Okay.
The first phrase is, quote, if he finds you agreeable, you may make some noise. So that word agreeable seems to me important because it has a synonym of cooperative orientation toward positive sum, win-win gain opportunities. So he's talking about a switch from zero-sum distributional contention to positive sum win-win opportunity orientation. And that refers back to the previous 2 paragraphs earlier where he says, Tao abides in the emptiness. The emptiness is the fast of mind. And then in the previous sentence, the spirit is an emptiness ready to receive all things. Mm-hmm. So when one is in that place, ready to receive all things, one thing that one is receiving is awareness of the other person's own perspective and their self-interests, which one needs to take into account to recognize opportunities for win-win mutual gain from cooperation and agreements. And that refers back to a previous phrase on page 26, right in the second line of page 26, where he's talking about the people who make this mistake of, trying to impose morals on tyrants. He says the people who make this mistake, the virtuous people who try to impose virtue on tyrants, are people who have, quote, no knowledge of the nature and the mind of man. So the implication is that the way to avoid this mistake is to be open to receiving knowledge of the nature and the mind of man, in particular, being open to receiving knowledge of the nature of the other person's interests and orientation and what they would see as a win-win mutual gain opportunity. And then one can be agreeable in their eyes by proposing terms of cooperation that are mutually beneficial as opposed to zero-sum distributional conflict. So that's the underlying analytics that I'm seeing in this text. I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Bill. I think it's very clear. And when you are talking about, I noticed the interest word. I talk about Chinese word you use. Okay, we translate as if he finds you agreeable, you may make some noise. The Chinese word called 入则鸣. Okay, 鸣 means the birds singing. Okay, so basically just ask 颜回. Remember, 入其凡 means go inside the cage. So the metaphor is this stage just like a cage, and then you just enter just like a bird. Okay, if you agree, then you just make some noise. So that's the word, and that's why another department, literature department, will take serious reading this text as a literature reading. Okay, so poetry, literature. Maybe.
Jason, can you focus on the Chinese word for agreeable and tell me what the other translations of that word are?
Actually, the agreeable, I will have to say, in this sentence, there's no agreeable in Chinese called 入. Okay, 入则鸣, 不入则止. Okay, so that means, okay, so if I go through the Chinese, okay, the Chinese word read as 若能入由其凡, that means word by word, go in, wandering the cage, right? Wandering inside the cage, and make the boss not fear, 无感其名. I'm the virtuous people. I go to your cage, but the boss, the tyrant, do not fear. I'm a virtuous people inside, right? Because a tyrant, I see a virtuous people come here. I don't want to have a sage, virtuous people live in my house, right? I don't want I want the people like me live in my house, even I'm not tyrant, right? So I don't let the tyrant fear you have this virtuous net. If 入, this word, you can say it's agreeable, or you say you can get close, then you make some noise. If you not get close, then you stop. I think that's Zhuang Tzu's advice.
So it sounds like there's two connotations to the word. One is humility, and the second is restraining one's self-interest and putting it on the shelf and putting it to the side in favor of the other person's welfare, and being concerned about their welfare and their interests, not one's own.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. That's right. And that's make this Zhuang Tzu readings very difficult, because I have to admit, I read when I was very young, and then I read again and again, but of course not on the daily basis, or I don't think every couple of years when I would. Every time I got a different idea, and right now the YouTube has another lecture, I mean in the Chinese Taiwan University, and from time to time I listen, and different professor, different department, they have the different way to talk with this one. So, it's a complex text, let's put it this way. Yeah.
Thank you.
So today in this meetup, because my primary interest is more on the philosophy. So my primary interest is Western philosophy. So you probably will see a lot of my view is westernized, okay? But I'm not saying that's incorrect, because you got to stand some point to look at this text. Otherwise, you just totally lost. Fred, please.
If you could return to the previous slide. Yeah, these edicts here: do not listen with the ears, but with the mind. Do not listen with the mind, but with the spirit. And here we come back again to Qi, spirit. And that sounds also, not surprisingly, sounds very Buddhist to me. And I take it that these are stages in achieving the emptiness, that you start by paying attention with your ears, and then you proceed to the mind, and then from the mind to the spirit. In other words, you internalize it. And I relate this back to baseball, because I relate everything back to baseball. I think of learning to field grounders. First, the coach gives you all sorts of different advice about how the mechanics of fielding grounders, and he's saying, listen with your ears and listen with your ears. But then after you get that, he'll say, no, you have to absorb it. It has to be in your mind. You know, don't just listen to what I'm saying and forget it. And then once you absorb that, he says, no, it can't be in your mind. It has to be so fundamental that you're not even thinking of it. It has to be part of your whole being. In other words, if you're thinking about it, you're going to fumble it. It has to be so intrinsic that you do it without thinking. And it seems to me that approaches the emptiness that's conveyed here, the fasting of the mind.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. And I agree with you on the baseball thing. You know, what I think about is ski, right? So unlike most people in America, probably ski in the young age. I don't ski until, I don't know, 40, 50, you know, so as a grown up to learn ski. So a little bit odd. So the coach teach me do this, you know, puts the pressure on the outer side of the foot. Then when you're ready to go, you have to forget about this. You have to empty this. If you, during the ski, you start to think about your push on the right hand, that right foot or that foot, then you fall. Okay, so the same situation that I learned, you know, I will say that skiing, I have the same situation. Another thing about the comment about Buddhism, I really have this problem on here, the emptiness, okay? Because this one has been hijacked by Buddhism teaching. So everybody, not only people in Western world, also in Chinese, in Taiwan, any place, will say, oh, that's, so sunyata, okay, that's empty in the Buddhism teaching. Chinese translate as kong. This word is xu, okay. So what's the difference between kong and the xu, okay? So I will say Buddhism, emptiness, is talking about the nature. The nature is empty. But this Taoism, xu, means not nature emptiness. You make it empty, okay? So it's unnatural, it's a human effort to make it empty. Unlike Buddhism, empty is, it should be empty at the beginning, it's empty. So I think that's the subtle difference. And I don't want to have a further argue on that, but that's just my thinking. I think that's difficult.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Jason.
All right, thank you, Fred. CK, please.
Yeah, Jason, I'd just like to make an observation about the Chinese text.
Okay.
I'm wondering whether you're using the classical Chinese characters or
Yes.
whether you're using both classical Chinese characters and simplified characters in the text.
all use traditional character.
Because if you look Wu, for example, Wu
Okay.
Tingzhi, this is not a classical character. This is a simplified character.
Yeah, sorry, you know, I forget because sometimes I'm lazy to type. I just cut and paste. So
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
Thank you to correct me, and then doesn't mean I will fix it because really sometimes I have no time to go detail every single one, and really rely that people on you to tell me the mistake. Thank you, CK. Anyway,
that's all right. I mean, I understand it. It's just I'm just wondering because of consistency. I try to be, but you know, it takes time. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So that rely on your help. So anyway, Angel, please.
Okay, hi. I've got 3 questions. So the first one is, they're all related. So are we able to apply, in the conversation, are we applying this also to real life, or are we really staying in just the context of this story?
Okay.
And if we can, then I have a couple questions around real life, like the tyrant person here. Could he be, is it just about like a ruler, or could it be a tyrant in your life, like someone who's like a little mini tyrant? I mean, is that how we can apply this as well? And then also the next question is about virtuous persons. What about those that are, say, like priests or monks or nuns, and they're known for their virtuousness, and how does that apply in this situation, in this story?
Okay, thank you, Angel. And then the answer is yes, yes, yes. Okay, so of course, we don't have a tyrant today, unless you want to see Biden as tyrant, then that's another way. But I think we can see in the real life, right? The tyrant could be your father, okay, could be your boss, your manager, and then so I think that's the situation. And the number three, your question about nun and the priest, I don't know how about you, okay, but my personal experience, I do have a problem to be living or stay close with a person who has, how do we say, conspicuous virtue, okay? So I believe of course, I want the virtuous people, that's right, but that's a difference between virtuous and conspicuous virtue, okay? So I don't want everything I speak something without say thank you. People want to remind me, or you want to show me, what's the proper way to do it, and I just live my life uncomfortable. So that's my person, and I assume they have a lot of people like me, and that's why I see Taoism teaching fit for me, because I really have a problem. I would rather with people sitting, eating, drinking, and not talking too much about health, okay, animal right. When I eat steak and tell me the animal right, it's really not happy for me. And that's my personal, but, and I don't know, how do you think? Alexandra.
I'm at a cafe again, so you might hear the music again. Sorry about that. But my question was, how does this tie into philosophy insofar as if there is disinformation or there is encryption, you can't receive it as well because it's not meant to be received except for by certain people. So I feel like this would fail on that. Be curious to get your thoughts, especially from a
I'm sorry, Alexandra, I didn't hear your question clearly because a lot of background noise.
Okay, I'll just put it in the chat.
Okay, please, yeah. And somebody can, if you read it, can you rephrase for me? Because okay, you put in the chat. When I got chance, I look at. Okay, thank you anyway. Okay, let me move forward, and then let me see. Okay. Okay, so here it become more mystical. Okay, so let me see. We go this one. Okay, so here, Zhuang Zi is talking about the situation. Okay, do not show any conspicuous method. Do not exhibit any conspicuous purpose. I think purpose is better. It's called 无门无毒. Okay, 毒 means not poison, means that's another ancient word, means the purpose, the goal. Okay, so never show your method, never show your purpose. Live at the open and stop with what you cannot help. So that's why I want to mention it's very different from the real Confucius teaching, right? Confucius will teach you so-called sumen bonen, right? The only rest on the perfect. But Zhuang Zi's teaching is you rest, you stop on the place you cannot help, don't push. Okay, so finally, he talked about a very interesting word. He said, you will be easily successful. Okay, this word is very strange, but I think I hope you get it. It is easy to stop walking, but rather difficult to walk without touching the ground. So let's put on hold for a while, go back to look Tao Te Ching, the Lao Tzu's writing on chapter 27. Chapter 27, Lao Tzu, who is about 300 before, 400 before
Jason,
Zhuang Zi. Yeah, go ahead.
can I interrupt? Alexandria has put her question in the chat. You might want to quickly.
Okay,
go
let me finish. Okay. Okay, then let me finish this one, then we go back to Irendra's question. Okay, thank you, TRJ, to remind me. Okay. Okay, so chapter 27 is talking about Tao Te Ching, talking about the skillful move, leaving no trace to follow. The skillful speak, leaving no flow to blend. The skillful enumerate using no counter. Okay, so basically that's what the hidden intelligence. Okay, so Zhuang Zi is very different than the Taoism teaching is very different, right? He doesn't reject the virtue, but Taoism doesn't reject the virtue, doesn't reject knowledge, but his ideal, the virtue should be hidden. In chapter 5, okay, we will talk about the Taoist virtues, the view of virtue, on virtue, right? You need to hidden. If you show off your virtue, show off your knowledge, it's no different than tyrant, okay, because they become you pursuing the name. So it's very important. So later on, he talked about another example, Confucius, okay, here is Taoist talking about flying without wing, knowing without knowledge. Okay, so that's very important message here. So how can you fly without wing? How do you know it without knowledge? In my opinion, my personal opinion is just like Fred's example, learning baseball, or my example, or learning ski. You need to learn something, then forget about it. Okay, so you know something, but you forget about all the knowledge. Okay, so I think that's the way he want to do, and he doesn't want to do is galloping mind. So your mind, you should not like wandering around. You should, I don't know, be empty, but not, because when you see the empty wall, sometimes your mind wandering around. It doesn't. Okay, so here's a little bit about the cultivation, how to control your mind. And there's one good example here. He used the word hinge, Chinese word called niu. So he go back to the mystery of all things. He used the word as hinge. So you can here become mystical here. Okay, so but the basics Zhuang Zi want to talk about is you should behave like a hinge, the door hinge, right? So it doesn't matter how you push, nobody resists you, and then you move around, you stand there. And if you ever practice Tai Chi, I mean the Kung Fu, the Tai Chi, you will know if the Tai Chi master usually will tell you your body movement, you should make sure your spine like a hinge, right? When people push you, hit you, you just turn the way you, the force. So here is all connected in this way about your physical movement, your mental movement, and your social movement is all like hinge. I think that's the message he wanted to talk about. And in this way, I cannot stop thinking about a Chinese saying, talking about the great wisdom appears stupid, right? So if you have the real wisdom, you don't let people feel like, oh, this guy is a genius. You will let people feel, oh, this guy is just normal people, you know, and but he's really smart. Okay, so I think that's the concept Zhuang Zi or Taoist try to teach. Yeah. So let me answer Alexander's question, and then what's your question? My question is from Hegelian perspective. how do you deal with emptiness receiving information that isn't meant to be received, like encryption of disinformation that is specially meant to terminate the hearer through the poison? That's a tough question, but I think in the story 3, okay, I hope I can go through the story. You talk about how to deal with message. I think they will give you number 3, A3. Remember we have a 3 story, okay. Oh no, number 2, next story. I will answer your question, Ranger. Okay, we're going to the ambassador. Okay, how to become a messenger. Okay, so we will have an answer on this one. Not me. Zhuang Zi will have an answer on this one. So let me go to the comment on this one. Let me answer Bill's question first. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks. I just have a comment, certain phrase here. On the top of page 28, it says, "This is the mystery of things." And then in the previous sentence, there's a phrase that I want to focus on. It says, quote, "If you can keep your ears and eyes to communicate within and shut out consciousness and knowledge, then even then ... You know, good. That phrase, if you can keep your ears and eyes to communicate within and shut out consciousness and knowledge, this refers to elsewhere, I think on the previous page, where it says, get beyond your own individuality. And it's kind of defining emptiness. I don't think he's saying ignore yourself completely. I think what he's saying, to give an analogy, is imagine I have a car where the speedometer indicator on my dashboard works correctly, but there are some other indicators on my dashboard that are broken. They light up when they should not light up. They fail to light up when they should light up, et cetera, et cetera. The key to emptiness and getting beyond individuality is, quote, you know, keep your ears and eyes to communicate within, namely distinguish between which of the dashboard lights on my inner life are working and in giving, you know, accurate information, and which ones are giving what this author would call self-interest or retaliation. In that next paragraph, he gives the advice to not retaliate. If a dashboard light's lighting up and saying retaliate, I need to ignore that. There's plenty of dashboard lights that I just should ignore, but it doesn't mean I should ignore all the dashboard lights. And that's what he means, I think, when he says, if you can keep your ears and eyes to communicate within. It's like there's this internal communication process, which, you know, people who've practiced meditation for a long time, you know, are familiar with, that distinguishes what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. And speaking as a meditator myself, my experience is that a spaciousness arises, like the Tibetan Buddhists call spacious mind. A spaciousness arises on the inside when one learns to let go of passing information that is not particularly helpful to act on. And that spaciousness, I think, is what he's referring to when he talks about emptiness. And there's also, as the guy who mentioned the baseball analogy referred to, there's a quality of getting beyond the chatty parts of the mind, so that they don't chat as much or one doesn't hear them as much. And that can also put one in the moment in a way that's like that baseball player fielding grounders without really thinking about it. So yeah, I don't think this emptiness and getting beyond individuality is about ignoring the inner life. I think it's about having good ears and eyes to communicate within, to quote that quote, about the inner life. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, thank you for sharing your idea. And I agree with you that here the translation put the without individuality. So here's the page we talk about. Let me read this one. Okay, so Guo Xiang, okay, the people in the philosopher in the 3rd and the 4th century, okay, talking about, since we are all living with men, we cannot get away from them. But the human world is always changing, one generation from another generation. Only those who have no prejudice and do not insist on its own self can follow the change and not suffer. Okay, so this one first answer the question about does that useful for today's world? Yes. Okay, and the Chinese word 无心而不自用. Okay, so English translation just make it simple, no prejudice. But if you talk about the Chinese word, talk about 无心, doesn't mean no heart. That means you have no preset knowledge and you don't insist on your own usefulness, the word 用, okay? Fung You Lan, the translator in the 20th century, he said this story shows emptiness without individuality, without self. Just I agree with Bill talking about. It's not means ignore yourself. Okay. I think later on next dialogue we'll talk about individuality. Okay, is the best way to deal with men, the best way to live in the world of men. To be without self is the essence of Zhuang Zi's doctrine. Okay, so he quote, the perfect man has no self. Okay, as he said in the chapter, actually in the chapter 1, if one can be really without self in the human world, he will offend no one. Okay, so I think the good word to think is hinge. Okay, you should, if anybody practice Tai Chi, you will know the meaning of hinge. So you kind of go along with the world, but you've never been changed. Okay, so in this way, but not you are strong, stand still, not being changed. It's because you are a hinge. You will never be changed. So I like a quote from the chapter 1. Zhuang Zi is talking about the perfect man has no self. The spiritual man has no achievement. The true sage has no name. Okay, so we just keep this one here, and then we can go on later. And if you want, here we talk about the fasting of mind, and then let me go to the second story, and then we leave the third story for the next time. Okay, so let me go to the second story. So at least I can answer Alexandra's question about the misinformation, okay, or harmful information. So let's deal with this one. And then the third one is shorter, so we can put the A3 and the rest for next time. It's not a big deal. So important is the first message. So second story. This person, okay, Sam deal with Confucius, okay. Zhigao, Duke of Shi, okay, so that's another person, okay, political person, and I will assume he is a Confucius student. Being about to go on a mission, go on mission to the state of Qi. Qi is a powerful state. He asked Confucius, okay, the king is sending me on a mission, which is very important. The state of Qi is probably receive me as an ambassador with great respect, but will not be in hurry to attend to the business. Even an ordinary man cannot be easily pushed. Still there's a prince estate. I am full of apprehension. You always told me that in all undertaking, great or small, Tao alone leads to happy issue. In this case, I cannot succeed. There will be trouble from men. Okay, if I could succeed, there will be trouble of nature. Okay, so here he talk about trouble of nature. He talk about trouble of yin and yang. So this guy, Zhigao, this person, he asked Confucius. He's in trouble. Okay, and in today's sense, we may not see it's a trouble, but during that time, you know, there's no telephone, no internet. When the king asks you to go to the other state to, as an ambassador, as a representative, it's a tough job, right? Because you travel there for 3 months, then you have to send message and take message and come back. You don't know what's going on. So he said, if I'm not successful to finish this mission, right, I have the trouble from the man, which it means I will get punished by the law. even I succeed, I have a trouble from the nature or from the yin and yang, because it's a, you really don't know, because they send the message, you get back, you really don't know, what's the result, because it takes time. And then the kid may say, hey, great job, Jason, but 3 months later, something changed, then you got killed. So during this period of time, you still feel uneasy during the time. That's why he called the trouble of from yin and the yang. And he said, okay, he told before I go, I already suffering from the trouble of nature, because he said he drink ice. I think he says, yeah, he feel hot and he keep drinking ice. It's still very hot because I haven't done anything, just hear this mission. I already in trouble from yin and the yang. I keep drinking cold water, but that's the problem. So Confucius' teaching is this. Okay, again, this Confucius is not real Confucius. It's a Taoist Confucius. He said, okay, but this word is matches. He said, in this world, there are two great binding principles. 大戒, okay, that's the Confucius words, okay, binding principle. You can say as a human bondage, something bound you. One is called mean, which is destiny. The other called yi, is your duty. His example is a child love for his parents is destiny. It is inseparable from the child's heart. The subject of allegiance to his sovereign is duty. He must have a sovereign. Okay, there is no escape in this world. Okay, so remember the situation, the human bondage situation. These are two great bonding principles. Therefore, to serve one's parent well, no matter what condition one is in, the perfect of filial piety. We talk about 孝. Okay, the Confucius teaching. Okay, filial piety. The second one, to serve one's sovereign well, no matter what he asks to have done, is the highest of loyalty. Chinese word 忠. Okay, so simple. Confucius say, in this world, you are being governed by two things. One is your destiny. One is your duty. Right? Destiny is just like you love in today's American, you will say, I love my kids. I have a destiny to do something for my kids. That's one bondage. I have to work and I have a duty to your company, or I have to pay tax, duty to the country. That's your duty. These two things you cannot escape. So his point is, you may proceed your mission. You need to go. Okay, you have no choice because that's one of these two. Back to Alexandra's question about misinformation. I think from now on it's important. And if you read chapter 2, okay, which talking about language, metaphysics, okay, I think that's also, just to remind you about chapter 2. Chapter 2 is talking about, at the beginning, talking about the music of people, music of earth, music of the heaven, of the nature. Basics in chapter 2, okay. Zhuang Zi is talking about our language, determine what's true or false. And then the language is not much difference than the sound of the earth, which is birds singing, the wind blowing, and what is the sound of nature, sound of heaven. So, and this kind of sound is going to determine what's true or what not true. So here's Zhuang Zi's view about the message. So he's talking about message only, no exaggeration. That's why I put this one here. He said, I beg to tell you what I heard, the intercourse. Okay, so I'm going to skip this part. Basically, he talked about to transmit message which express delight or anger of two parties is the most difficult thing in the world. So Confucius is talking about, or Zhuang Zi is talking about the most difficult word, the situation you send the message to someone, okay? And then you have to express the delight or anger of these two parties. That's the most difficult part. And he called, in the translation called 法言, I think the 法言 means the common saying, okay? So transmit what the party meant to say, but not undue exaggeration, okay? So exaggeration is the thing you have to avoid. So here in this paragraph, Zhuang Zi or Confucius try to tell you, the exaggeration is the cause of falsity, and the falsity will make people disbelieve, and that's disbelief the cause of the messenger's problem. Okay, the messenger will start to suffer. Okay, so he gives the example. Okay, you can see Zhuang Zi or Confucius give an example. He said the skillful wrestler, okay, or you want to, I think 以巧斗力, we translate as a competitive athlete, became with friendliness. And Zhuang Zi used the word yang and always end with yin, which is antagonism. Okay, so when you start to play baseball, you are happy friend, but to the end become too competitive. Then you kind of dislike each other. Better way is this: party drinking, okay, ceremonial drinking according to ceremony at the beginning, observe good order, but end with confusion, turmoil, right? In drinking party, you know, at beginning people are happy, and another time end with fight. What's why? Because everything begins with simple, but as ending is near, they become complex. That's Zhuang Zi want to talk about. So the example here he want to use is words are like wind and wave, which is very similar, or you can see as a continuation from chapter 2. He talk about the words. It's just like music or the noise of a human and the noise of earth. There's no difference, okay? So words are like wind and wave. Action run the risk of actual loss. Wind and wave are easily set in motion. Risk can easily turn into real danger. Anger is chiefly caused by artful words and partial speeches. Okay, I'm going to jump here. If the agent does work without knowing how, who knows what will be the end? Okay, so here, let me make it simple. Basics, Zhuang Zi want people as a messenger to just send a message without emotion, not happy, not anger, just pure message. I think that's he want to do. And the next one he talking about, I highlight talking about is this part. He can I translate as let your mind make excursion with whatever may happen. Okay, so here he talk about this word excursion. Remember we talk about the excursion on the chapter 1, the birds, happy excursion, or sometimes one called wandering. And then in chapter 3, the knife goes through, Zhuang Zi used the same word, okay, wandering, the space, previous dialect, previous story, Zhuang Zi is talking about, Zhuang Zi is talking about wander in the cage, right? Here, talking about make your mind wandering with whatever happened, okay? So that's the important words he is talking about. So basically, he's going to not deviate from the original instruction you receive. Do not urge on the settlement, okay? So basically, he want to do here will be the similar to Bhagavad Gita's situation. You just do your duty. Don't go over on that. The prince, your boss, asks you to do this. Don't think about the result. Don't take the emotion on that. That's a happy message or that's an angry message. You just go over, spell out the word, do your duty, take the word, and come back. Don't think about the result. That's the karma. If you use the Hinduism word, that's a karma. Okay, that's not your duty. You just do a duty as a message. So whatever you get, just stop there. So satisfaction, the satisfactory settlement is to be made with time. So if it's satisfactory, it takes time. But this satisfactory settlement, once it made, it's too late to change. I think most of people probably have this experience, right? So if you, the good thing usually take time to settle down as a messenger. But the bad thing, the dissatisfactory settlement, if you make a mistake, it is very difficult to change back, to take it back. It's just like you speak the wrong word to some people in the wrong situation, even you apologize 100 times, it's not going to work. So here he talks about cultivate your spirit. So I think that's the this story Zhuang Zi tried to talk about. And then let me read the last comment, then I will stop here. Then let's have a short discussion on this. So Fung You Lan take this story as this story shows that in this world there are things which are inevitable. Okay, so talk about which we cannot but do. Okay, so if you think about Bhagavad Gita's situation, right? That's the situation we are facing. We have something we must do. Okay, we have no control on the result. What we need to do, let us be resigned to the inevitable. Let us be at ease in the face of anything that may happen. Don't think about the result. Don't exaggerate. Let us live all to destiny. It is also essential to forget one's own self. Forget about yourself, because if you use Bhagavad Gita, Hinduism teaching would be, that's the, how to read it, Brahman and behind to do it. I didn't do it. I just, like a machine, I just send the message. If one forget one's own self, one will not love life, will not hate death. That means you don't care about life or death. Worldly success or failure is no importance. Okay, it's no importance to because you're just a messenger. Okay, in this way, that provides another way to look at your duty. Because in this story, Confucius is talking about, and we all face the same thing. We have two things: destiny and the duty. We have to do. We have no choice but do. And what's the way to do? So in this style, I will see it's very similar to what Krishna is going to teach Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. So I will stop here for today, and then we can have a short 10 minutes discussion, and if you have a question, and then my plan was finish to the third one, to tutoring the young tyrant, but I think that'll be fine because that one is short, and at least today we cover who Confucius' story. Joe, please.
Sorry, I was getting a call there. Yeah, I mean, I do use, there's a lot of parallels to the Gita from here, specifically with Bhakti Yoga. So, I mean, I'm sorry, Karma Yoga. So it was essentially the idea of selfless action. And so, and you can kind of see this in a way. You're also with Karma Yoga, you have your desires under control. So we've talked about things like the desire for fame and the desire for, worldly successes. This puts out here, and I mean, so you see how what we actually just talked about with meditation. actually kind of relates directly to this. But that is one path. The other thing is that it seems like the idea of exaggeration is nothing, it's kind of very similar just to temperance in general. Withholding oneself and being able to know the appropriate amount of pleasure to engage in, specifically, again, if you're drinking, you're not drinking too much, but you're not necessarily preventing yourself from, or basically giving it up completely. So that's a form of wisdom in a way too, because there's a knowledge of self within that. So I think that that's also something that we've kind of talked about here. But there's the last part is we talked a little bit about not being tied to outcomes, and that's also a part of karma yoga as well. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels here when it comes to both the Gita and other philosophies, I mean, as well. I mean, it's not necessarily, this is not relegated to, but you could see some very strong correlations with Gita. So that's pretty much
so. Joe, since you talk about Bhagavad Gita, I feel the second story is almost identical to what Bhagavad Gita is talking about. So if you bring the Krishna here to give advice for Zhigao, okay, and he probably will say exactly the same thing. But on the first story, do you see they are the similar way or different way? To me, it's a little bit different. Right? So
it's different, but there is this. I mean, there's the desire for fame was something that was interesting, but it seemed like that was something that was inevitable. That you will, if you overstep your bounds, you're essentially going to be desiring fame or something. That it's something that can't be resisted. But if we're talking about not being attached to outcomes and not dealing with our desires, or letting our desires dictate our actions completely, I think there's some relationship there. But yeah, I agree with you that absolutely the second story is very close to what we've talked about here in the past in the Gita, as well as other meetups. So
yeah, I think that's interesting. So next week we're going to talk about Bhagavad Gita chapter 7. Okay, SK is going to talk. So we probably have the similar situation we can talk, and this would be interesting to see. Different culture, different background. We probably have same situation, similar solution, or in a way opposite. We don't know. It's difficult.
And one other thing is just the selfless action aspect of it as well. That's also a very big part of karma yoga. So I mean, that there's a lot of overlap. But anyway, I'll yield to Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Bill, please.
Thanks. I want to focus on one line in this story. It's on, let's see, page 29. The kind of maybe 10 lines from the bottom, maybe 15 lines from the bottom. It says, quote, "If the agent does work without knowing how, who knows what will be the end?" So the implication seems to be that when you're an agent doing some work on behalf of your employer or the prince who's sent you as a diplomat, whatever, be sure to know how you're doing the work that you're doing. And then the example he gives is, suppose you're a third-party mediator diplomat who's been sent to help two princes, rulers of two states, negotiate a settlement to their dispute or their conflict. And the rule that you should follow is, do not coerce either prince into signing the settlement. Only facilitate a mutually agreeable, voluntarily agreed to settlement by the two sides, where each side is voluntarily agreeing to the settlement, not being compelled through compulsion to reach the settlement. So that's a rule to follow. And the advice that the agent should know how they're doing their work is know what rules you're following. And then the rule that he gives about, do not coerce the two sides to settle, only facilitate voluntary settlements, goes back to that earlier point from the earlier story about self-interest and about being in the emptiness state of consciousness, so that one can be aware of those other actors' self-interests that lead them to decide if they want to voluntarily agree to the settlement, and watch out for their signals they're sending that they don't want to voluntarily agree, and they just feel compelled into the settlement terms that are on the table. And so this notion of knowing how you're doing the work you're doing as being knowing what rules you're following expands to other rules, like earlier in the paragraph where he says, anger, fun, excitement, these are all internal thoughts and feelings that one should not allow into the driver's seat of one's actions. And I'll close with this comment. I think that's really what they mean when they say getting beyond yourself and getting beyond your individuality is drawing a clear distinction between the thoughts and feelings that one allows into the driver's seat of one's actions and words, and the other thoughts and feelings that one does not allow into the driver's seat of one's actions and words, kind of like dashboard lights, distinguishing between the ones that one pays attention to and the ones in one's driving behavior and the ones that one does not pay attention to. But one still has to notice all the thoughts and feelings on the inside in order to categorize them into the ones that one is going to act or speak on, and the ones that one's not going to act or speak on. So when he says, to close the circle on my whole comment, when he says, the agent doing work should know how he's doing his work, it seems to me know what rules you're following in the actions you're taking and the words you're saying to people, including especially rules for which thoughts and feelings to act on and which thoughts and feelings to be aware of, just insofar as being aware of them just enough to know to not act or speak on them. And so it's really this phrase, agent, know how you're doing what you're doing, is really advice to be paying attention to the internal. And, in terms of the language on that previous page, keep open those lines of seeing and hearing within for that communication within, which is awareness of thoughts and feelings as one proceeds in one's work. So thanks for listening, and I'll pass.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for sharing. And then I think that this text, we don't, and I don't think nobody will expect two persons will have identical learning for the same text. But important thing is get to fasten of your mind, okay, and receive this text. Then see what do you get from this text. That's the purpose of reading this. And then it's your decision how you want to use this one, or you want to totally reject this kind of philosophy. That's fine, okay, but at least you know something. Alice, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alice. I'm in New York, and I have a, oh, hold on. And so English is my second language. Maybe my English is not as good as your guys, but anyway, I have some of thought. So
Please.
I'm in New York, and I have a condo in Massachusetts. The place is in Quincy, and it's an apartment. I rent it out. And yesterday, my tenant called me, and she told me the faucet on the kitchen sink doesn't work, and it's leaking. The water came out, and she already turned it off, but she said, yeah, I think I need to fix the problem. But when she called me, it's already 5:30 p.m. And I tried to find a plumber in Quincy, Massachusetts, but they all shut down. And what should I do? And I have a friend. He is a contractor. His name is Tony. He's a contractor. So I just wonder if I call him or not. So what's in my mind is if I call him, he will think and take advantage of him, or will he refuse me, reject me, or will he think it's okay to look over, to take a look? So a lot of things in my mind is prevent me to call him. And then I think it's an illusion, right? I just think about a result, but it's a result I think it's not real result. And then I flip up. I think, oh, I need to call him and to see the real result. So yeah, so it's like Fung You Lan saying, you need to do, right? You need to do to see.
You need to do
result.
something, right? According to this.
Yeah, you call, and then you will see result. If you don't call, the result always in your mind, and there's no result came out. So that's why
I'm not in the situation. I fully understand your situation. I have the same situation, but I think what if that's just my learning. I learned as a long time learning from Zhuang Zi or Taoism. I would say I would do something, call him or say, okay, I will do my best to do it. And
yeah, I did call him. I did call him, and then I see the result.
Yeah, and forget about the result because that's my Friday, my Saturday. I need to do the meetup. So I do my best. Okay, then I deal on Monday. So
whatever. Yeah, I think about this experience yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always we face the same situation, and then that's very real. So when whoever talk about Zhuang Zi, Taoism is talking about other worlds, this concern about secular world. This chapter 4, is fully dedicated to the secular world, to this world. So it's not totally talking about outside world. It's not asking you to become hermit, forget about it. No, I think Zhuang Zi, at least in this chapter, is fully engaged in this world, what we need to do in this world. Whether or not you agree or not, that's another story, but he is focused in this book, in this chapter. Joe, please.
Yeah, I mean, I actually appreciate Bill calling our attention to that one passage, and the idea of a mediator not necessarily, imposing their will on either party. And I think that that's actually, it's very Taoist, in the sense that if you look at Tao 17 in particular, it talks about, not essentially using unnecessary speech so that people could say, we did it, and essentially the people feel like they've made the negotiation themselves, and that you were just there, but you were not necessarily imposing any kind of will. And I think that that's kind of, you see that throughout the text, throughout both stories, not necessarily, feeling like you have to have the answers. Yeah, I mean, I think that was an excellent example as well. There are I do see some parallels with Nana Yoga as well, but I'm not, I still have to think about that because it was an interesting way they actually, we talked about knowledge today. It's a little bit different than I think the way the Gita approaches it. But in any case, that was just, I had one other point about selfless action, but I'm getting another, I have to take something really quickly. So thank you.
May I make a quick comment based on what Joseph said?
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Joseph. It reminds me of something at the beginning of today's text where it talks about what happens when a diplomat goes to a state ruled by a prince who's young and impulsive and controlling and tyrannical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the flip side of the coin. So on one hand, we've got situations where people are voluntarily agreeing to things and respecting each other's self-interests. And the advice is to always try to be in that situation. On the other hand, we've got a situation of a diplomat sent to a tyrannical prince's state. And the advice is to recognize that when you're dealing with a tyrannical person who's not respecting people's self-interests and not respecting their own voluntarily, reached agreements and desire to reach only voluntary agreements, the advice to that diplomat confronted with that tyrannical leader is diplomat, recognize that's the situation you're in and don't try to make progress, because you're not gonna, because the person you're dealing with is tyrannical, controlling, you know, oppressive, not respecting people's self-interest, not expecting the line between voluntariness and compulsion, etc. And don't try to make progress with that person because they're not playing the game by the same set of rules that, you know, the Taoist masters advise people to play by, and recognize that and don't, you know. So I'll stop there.
All right, thank you. Joe, yeah, final word?
Yeah, just really one quick question. So DLJ actually put in the chat a little bit about some clarification around tyrannical, that this was somebody that was not necessarily an heir to the throne. I think it was something along those lines. That was considered a tyrant at that particular moment in time. Is that accurate? I mean, I'm not doubting you, DLJ. I'm sorry. You know,
Yeah, it was a non-hereditary monarchical leader or ruler. Not necessarily a bad thing.
During that, well, but that's a CK at the beginning as the question. But I just want to make sure that the tyrant may not be the proper translation of this way, because I think the Chinese text doesn't say. His Chinese text says spell out it's a terrible guy. Okay, so it's a negative description in Chinese text.
Anyway, thanks, Jason. A lot of good
All right,
work.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for that.
And Bill, that's your first time here, right?
Yes, it is my first time here. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you. And
Bill, where have you been? Let's start again now.
I'll see you guys next time. I look forward to it.
Jason.
You must have some background.
I
Thank you,
received
Jason.
a
Bye.
PhD from UCLA in the field of political economy. So analyzing human behavior and the rules that people follow and the effects of those rules is what I'm trained in.
Okay, great. Okay, great. We have you, John, and welcome any kind of background, and you always bring different dynamic on that. And then, thank you. And then, see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Jason, see you next week.